So the government is taking actions as they have been to be able to manage this crisis. And that's what we're here to talk about today, crisis management. And crisis management is a structured way and approach, not only to the challenges that we're facing today with this pandemic, but also how you can implement some of these crisis procedures you may face in the future. This webinar is focused at me sharing some of my ideas. It's not a lot of charts and diagrams and stuff like this. This is a matter of sharing ideas on how to deal with a crisis from an individual perspective, an organizational perspective, and a leader's perspective. Now, with all of that being said, I don't know everything. I always continue to learn, and I don't think there's anybody out there that knows everything, but that's what we're here to do today. One of the foundations of the American Business Chamber here in Kuwait is knowledge sharing, and that's what we're doing today. I'm trying to provide you with food for thought so that you can take these ideas and build from them and adapt and adjust them so that it supports you in your endeavors and the crises that you face today. Now, some of these slides are going to be very, very heavy. That was actually done on purpose. It's not a good thing to do, but it's done on purpose. And the reason why is I'm not going to read all of the slides, and I'm not going to go through every single thing on the slides, but I want to share as much information as I can so that you can go back to the slides later on and use them to support you in whatever it is that you are doing. We intend to hang these slides on our ABCK website and distro them so that you'll always be able to go back to them again. So, with all that being said, let's talk about crisis management. What is it? Crisis management is pretty much just how we react and deal with something that was unexpected and disruptive that's threatening or harming us, whether it is our company, us individually, or anything along those lines. Now, crisis management is a process, and if you see on the diagram off onto the right-hand side there, it's a process of risk management when there's nothing happening, and then when something happens, we transition to a crisis management. So risk management is something we always should be doing, and it's how we prepare and be able to properly react to all of these different things that we're going to end up having to do when we have a crisis. Now, there's also something called change management. Change management is rather normal in a company. They have people that are dedicated to change management. If you fail to innovate as a company, you fail as a company inevitably and go away. So change management is just how we adapt to the new environments. Now, this can be done on a personal level as well. When I was a young kid, there was no such thing as an iPad, a cell phone, and computers like we have today. But I've adapted and changed, just like you have. So change is normal. And change management is how businesses focus on being able to adapt to stay ahead of the game and be able to continue to be relevant. In a crisis, change management is just as relevant. As you transition out of the crisis and adapt to the new norms, adapt to the new business models that you may have, the new organizations you may have, change management is how and what will help you make that change. So, now that we've discussed what crisis management is, before we go any further, we should probably talk about mindset. I mentioned a little bit of it already. Change is normal. We all go through change. We always have been going through change. In my experience in the military as a young leader, one of the very first things I always learned was change is constant and it's always going to happen. We would plan for a week to do some kind of an operation, and then 5 minutes after it started, they would intentionally change everything. Why? Because they wanted agile and adaptive leaders that could think on their feet, that could make rapid decisions, and are used to change. So it's a normal thing. Embrace the culture of change. Embrace the fact that change will always happen. So with that being said, crisis. Crisis is not new either. There's been many, many incidents of crisis for humanity throughout history. You know, in the 1300s, we had the Black Death Plague that killed up to 200 million people. So when it comes to pandemics, yes, today, you know, we started with a health crisis that turned into a humanitarian crisis that's now an economic crisis, and we're dealing with it on many different fronts. But this is not new either. None of these types of crises are new. This isn't the first one we've had, and it's not going to be the last one. We need to be prepared for them. In the state of Kuwait, they've had lots of crises that they had to deal with. In 1831, 1/2 to 2/3 of the entire population died from the Great Plague. In 1982, they had a stock market crash, the Al-Souk Manak stock market crash that made $84 billion worth of checks worthless virtually overnight. They've had the oil slump for 6 years, slide in the oil prices. And when you look at the adjusted figures from those prices, today's figures, you're talking an adjusted price per barrel of $109 all the way down to $23 on a country that was predominantly dependent upon oil revenue back then. So the invasion of 1990, crisis is not new for Kuwait. And that's why I'm not surprised why Kuwait has done such an amazing job responding immediately to the crisis and going through all of the processes that they've done, because they've learned from all of these other crises. And today, its economy, for example, is one of the most resilient through this crisis of all the countries in the Middle East. So they've learned, they've adapted, and they continue to move forward. Business is the same exact thing. You see a couple of businesses down there, they don't exist anymore. If you fail to innovate, you fail to change, you fail to adapt, you fail to deal with crisis, you go away. So this is not new. But one of the normal factors of a crisis is the emotions, the emotional factor. And this is one of the things that we need to be careful about. It's easy to get lost in emotions. When you start thinking about emotions, you got to remember that emotions are a choice. I know that sounds odd, but you can choose to be happy or you can choose to be sad. There are things that affect you. Your environment affects you, other people affect you, without a doubt. But emotions are a choice. And that goes with fear. Fear can be a good thing. It's a sixth sense to let you know that there's something you need to be aware of and something to be cautious of. But the reality is fear is based on something usually that hadn't even happened yet. It's your mind telling you, oh, this could happen, be scared. So that is also a choice. And what you have to do is when all of this hits you and all of these negative things come to you, you need to be able to take a deep breath, especially as a leader, and think more rationally and not let your emotions override your decisions. So when you start taking a look at all of that, you need to think about all of those different things. So how do you prepare for a crisis? Well, as a leader, you need to understand what is expected of you. You should also have priorities. My particular priorities personally is people first, organizations, customers, then shareholders. And when I say people first, you're talking about the health, safety, security, welfare of those people. So that, have a proper mindset in that regard to be prepared for a crisis. Now, for an organization, you should be looking at risk management and have someone dedicated towards risk management all the time. You should be thinking about a crisis response plans, have operating procedures for these types of things, have a budget and resources set aside for crisis because you know it's going to happen. We know change happens and we know crisis is going to happen. So this should be an integral part of our organization as well. You should also be able to have a central hub of locations where you can pull reliable information. Also have an operations center. This, for small businesses, and a lot of what I'm talking about today is small, medium enterprises, smaller businesses. Granted, major corporations, they have all of this, but if you lead a division of a corporation or a sector of a corporation, a lot of what I'm talking about, you can apply specifically to that sector as well. But have some kind of a crisis management something. Have somebody as an operations center dedicated to the crisis and focused, because a crisis, things are changing every hour right now. And you need somebody just dedicated to resourcing all that information, all the sources that are there to help you, all of the changes that are occurring in policies and procedures, not maybe just here, but globally. If you have logistics requirements outside this country, what about those countries where everything is coming from? You need to be able to have somebody fixated on all that so that you as a leader and as an organization, as you develop your response and your plan, you know how to adapt and react to that kind of thing. Now, the same goes for individuals. We have responsibilities as individuals as well. We should be ensuring that we have investments and assets set aside to make sure that we can get ourselves through any crisis. We should have essentials and standards as well. Essentials, if you take medicine, you should have a stock, you should have a backup amount of medicine. You shouldn't be on the verge of being out all the time. Never let your car run out of gas. Always have at least a quarter of a tank of gas. And as you know things are going to happen or potentially happen, you see things unfolding, then adjust accordingly and be prepared. Because running out at the last minute, wiping out all the shelves of the stores is only harming the rest of the society, and you are just part of the problem. So be prepared ahead of time and alleviate being part of the problem. And then count on reliable resources for your information. Don't get caught up in all this social media and rumors and all this other chit chat that's going around. Look for reliable sources. And if you're over here like we are in the state of Kuwait or overseas, enroll in the U.S. Embassy STEP program so that you get alerts and notifications from them. And be part of organizations like the American Chamber of Commerce, AmCham Kuwait, so that you get reliable, immediate information and you are made aware. So now that a crisis does happen, what's the first thing everybody does? Everybody looks for a leader. So what is a leader in crisis? The first thing is what is a leader? That's actually the first question, because there's a big difference between a leader and a manager. It's a mindset. Leadership is a mindset. Leadership are people that have visions, that influence, they affect change, and they find solutions to problems to achieve those visions. They're different ways of thinking. Now, if you have that mindset, that means you're people-centric. You're selfless, and people come first. And this becomes very important when you start looking at a crisis. So if you're that kind of leader and you have that kind of skill set, then you automatically will be the one that everybody ends up turning to in the midst of a crisis. So make sure that you step forward, accept the challenge, and start addressing all of those things that the people need. And what they need is they need people that are empathetic, that understand their position as well and the challenges that they're facing, their insecurities, what are they afraid of, and answer those kind of questions. They communicate. And speaking of communication, it is one of the more critical factors when it comes to any type of a crisis. Leaders, they speak early and they speak often. They're open, they're honest, they're transparent, and they immediately dispel false information. Once rumors get out there, it's devastating to an organization, it's devastating to a country, and it needs to be addressed right away. Your demeanor and how you act makes a difference on everybody else. They look to you as a leader. So they look at how you act and how you're responding to everything, and it has an impact on them too. So instill calm, instill confidence, and hope. Hope is one of the biggest factors that there is out there when it comes to all of this. Then when it comes to communicating, like I said, one of the key factors of that is communicating hopes. Now, another aspect of communications I like to address is communicating in person. Now, here we are, especially over here in Kuwait, we're working remotely. We have been for a very long time now. Use video and teleconferencing as your primary means of communication. Interact with them as much as you can, not just through messaging and emails and correspondence like that. Interact with them, see how they're doing, see their face, let them see you, let them see your demeanor. That is extremely important, and it makes a big difference in people. So when a crisis happens, what are our first steps that we take? The first thing we do is we need to see the big picture. You can't make decisions, you can't develop a strategy, you can't do anything until you understand the big picture. We need to think and we need to react decisively. We need to be timely in our decision-making process, but we need to pause first to make sure that we understand the big picture of what's all going on. And as you see up there, the first report is always wrong or incomplete. I always hated that sentence. I've always hated that comment. And the reason why was because for 20 years in the military, I was usually the first one to be reporting. So for somebody to assume I was wrong used to just drive me nuts. But the truth is, it is very true. It is usually incomplete. And we need to take a deep breath and we need to look at all of the factors that are involved beyond how it impacts me, beyond our little bubble and how it impacts collectively. Does it affect my supply routes, my distributors? How does it affect collectively? How does it affect my employees, my ability to function? So you need to know what you are facing in a crisis and all of the different people out there that it is affecting. Now, what that means is you need to understand the impact that it is having. Now, there's a tremendous amount of different ways that you can identify the impact that something is having on you in a business. There's tremendous amounts of charts and all of these different diagrams that you can use and everything else. But I like to take a more simpler approach. And what I do is I take the business plan approach. When you start a new business, the first thing you do is you develop a business plan. That shows an investor, that shows everybody that you have thought through all the different aspects of a business and that it is something that is likely going to be successful and worth investing into. So the business plan is what I like to start with. And not only that, I use a business plan also to reevaluate where I am periodically. And when a crisis hits, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to see where I am right now. I want to identify my new strengths and weaknesses, my vulnerabilities, and I want to see what kind of opportunities that I have out there. And I want to use tools that allow me to see some more of those opportunities. And that's what exactly a business plan does for me. So what I do is I think through what are those opportunities, what are the things I may transition in, how can I streamline my organization. I think through all of that, and then I develop a business plan questionnaire. And then I address each one of those areas. And here is some samples of a little bit about what I'm talking about when it comes to my questionnaire. For example, what does my company do? It may adjust, it may do more, it may do less. And I plug that in and I list that out and I write down every single thing that my company does and could potentially do. This also allows me to look at milestones and think of where should I be in the future? What can I not do today? What will I not be able to do tomorrow? And how do I adjust properly for that? The next thing is, what can I do? Well, technology, I may have machinery. I may have a 3D printer that can produce items that are needed today. So how can I adjust very quickly and focus on those demands that are out there for today? But also identify and start looking at the future. Because I don't have a 3D printer today, but I will need one in the future, and it is going to make a difference. So now I'm putting it in my business model, and I have a trigger on when I'm going to implement that into my business. So take a look at what are your capabilities and goals. What do you need to do to achieve those? The next thing is a market analysis. Now, what is needed today? What is needed in the future? All of this falls under market analysis, capabilities, and goals. So take a look at a market analysis, and when you look at your market analysis, I kind of look at it in a crisis. I look at it from two different perspectives. I look at what is the market analysis right at this moment in the crisis, and then I look at what is the market analysis going to be after this crisis is over with. How does it impact society? How did this crisis impact society, and what are going to become the new norms? Not the norms that have been established during the crisis, but what will inevitably become the new norms. Right now, we're doing everything online. Everything. All of our business is online. But that is not the new norm. We will transition out of this crisis. This crisis will end. We will be meeting again. But not all of our meetings in the future will now be in person like they used to be. So what is the new norm? And identify that, plug that into your market analysis as well. Infrastructure requirements. Infrastructure requirements are kind of interesting. So I'll give you one example of what I'm talking about. Now, online, and like I said, is a new norm. It's a good thing because, you know, there's lessons learned and benefits to everything that happens, including, sadly, a crisis. For example, a crisis has pushed us to embrace technology better. A crisis has made us realize that we can actually achieve a lot online. So with that being said, we start looking at our infrastructure requirements, and I realized an aspect of my business is consulting. Now, traditionally, I always consulted in your office or my office. And I now realize that an aspect, or at least a portion of my consulting, can now be done online and is much more valuable to a company because now it has a larger target audience and they can use it for refresher training as well. So now I think back, and if I have a small business and I'm renting an office space with a couple of people, I realize, you know what, I might be able to share office space with somebody else and have use it for half a week. They use half a week, and I've now minimized my cost in my infrastructure requirements. So when you look at infrastructure requirements, take a look at all of these different factors. How is it affecting you today? How can it affect you tomorrow? But also take a look at how is it impacting in costs, because you know you're saving money right now because a lot of the infrastructure is not even being used. How does that roll into your revenue? So take a look at all of these different factors. Key participants, if you're looking at branching out into new sectors, trying new ideas, that's another thing you need to look at. Who are the subject matter experts? What about suppliers? What about distributors? How, not only for you, but you for them. So take a look at all of those types of things. Legal requirements, especially how does it change today? You know, today, we just recently in ABCK had a seminar on what are the legal aspects of for employment and all of these and leases and all of these types of things. These are legitimate things you need to be looking at for your organization as well. You know, what legal action can you take when it comes to your employees? What are your staff requirements? Staff in your operational structure as you look into the future. You know, a lot of people realize, you know, our overhead's a bit high and we don't need what we have, but we need to streamline the way we do business and who does that business. But we have a lot of talent that we can use elsewhere. So they're looking at readjusting their organizations and shifting that talent elsewhere. But they're also looking at what talent do I need to bring in? For example, risk management. If you don't have somebody on your staff that is at least familiar with risk management and help you be able to transition and prepare for a crisis, prepare for change, you need to maybe look at addressing that factor as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you look into each one of these sectors. Financial is always one of the very first things we always tend to look at. When we look at financial, when we think of a crisis, we look at how it's going to financially impact us and all of the things that we need to do to ensure our financial validity. So, but you need to look at that overall because there's a lot of different factors, and you need to know the second and third order effects of creating more liquidity, increasing business costs, budget and debt restructuring, because those have impacts on things such as your taxes, ratings and evaluation, and regulatory issues. So as you look at your revenue, it's not just about what's coming in and what's going out. It's also looking at, as you adjust, how does that affect your financial plan overall? So, and then revenue streams, creative new ways to do revenue streams and all these types of things. So when you look at a financial plan, look at it from a much bigger, broader picture than just the basic traditional method that we are, and with not just the cost. Now, you know, the market is going down here. This is going to, well, you're making changes too, and it's going to affect you financially. The other thing is I really always suggest people always do a SWOT, a strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats worksheet. Fill out the worksheet, fill in each areas of the worksheet, and you'll start noticing that you have more vulnerabilities now in areas that you didn't before, and you have opportunities that you may not have before. You know, for example, we're all working online. There's a lot more online presence in a business sense. Well, guess what? Vulnerability to cyber attacks has skyrocketed, and it is now a predominant target out there. Who are they targeting beyond the healthcare and a lot of these other things? How are they? What are some of the concerns that you need to have now? What kind of training do you need to do now for your personnel for this increased threat? So there's a lot of different things to take a look at when you do a SWOT, but a SWOT is an outstanding quick way to lay out all of the different sectors to look at. But I also offer that a SWOT's a great tool to take a look at yourself and take a look at on a personal, an individual level. You know, what are some of the assets that you provide? Where are some of your weaknesses, and what can you be working on right now? What are some of the opportunities that are out there for you right now? There's a lot of online courses that are out there right now that are very, very cheap or free. Are you capitalizing on those? What are the threats and vulnerabilities to you? Do one of these for yourself too, because this doesn't just apply for business, it can apply individually as well. Marketing and sales plan. You know, this is a very, very big one. Bottom line is, are you reaching your customers, and can your customers reach you? And when I talk, one of the things that pops in my head for this one is that I've been trying to obviously improve my little home office that I have here. I need to get another laptop computer, get a couple of little things out there. Now, here in Kuwait, we have some great companies that have great technological equipment that you can buy from. So I've been through all of them. And for the last 2 weeks, I have been trying to buy a simple laptop computer through all of these great companies that I normally buy everything from. I walk in there, I give them my same credit card, but for some reason, that credit card, an American credit card, will not work on their online services, whether it just won't accept foreign credit cards, or it allows you to plug in an address, but not a zip code, and they validate your credit cards in America by zip code. So how many of these businesses have lost money from people beyond just me? How about you? How many of your businesses are losing money because it's not user-friendly or easier to use, or you're not reaching your customers? So take a look at your marketing and how well are you marketing? How have you adjusted your marketing based on the crisis that's going on right now? Because, it's interesting, people are reading a lot more newspapers today. So newspapers and traditional platforms that were lower percentage may have climbed extensively. People are a lot more concerned about what the media has to say every day. Take a look at pricing. Are you marketable? Are you competitive? People are giving discounts. Keep the revenue turning. Reduce your profit margin. Keep money moving. Keep people employed. Take a look at the big picture in that as well. And then milestones. We talked a little bit about milestones, but take a look at the milestones that you have in place. Take a look at the initiatives that you have, and plug milestones and timelines to that, and triggers that kick you into that next change that you want to do out there. And take a look at that when it comes to new opportunities that you're looking at plugging into your business, and those that you're looking at removing from your business. You may want to do something for a little bit longer period of time, but inevitably phase that out and transition to something else. Well, how are you going to do that? What is your strategy specifically for that? And what are your indicators that you're at the point now that it's time to do that? And then we're wrapping up when it comes to the business questionnaire. Take a look at your profits. Profit distribution. We have a traditional model in business for all of our profits and distribution, but you may need to adjust that. You may find that you have a weakness when it comes to having money set aside for your business to be able to function in times of crisis and minimal revenue draw. So you need to relook your profit distribution and your profit sharing goals and your on-hand capital. Exit strategy from a business plan development. You look at exit strategies from multiple perspectives. What are your triggers that it's time for your company to go up for sale? What about merging with other companies, going public, liquefying your company? But you know what? There's also opportunities out there right now. What about other companies that are just like you that are struggling? It might be time to look at buying those or merging with those companies and being able to survive both companies. So there's a lot of different perspectives when you take a look at exit strategy, not just for yourself, but for other companies. And there's a lot of opportunity that may be had in the exit strategy model. And then, of course, every business model has appendixes that include other things. And one of those is resumes. I always want to keep a stack of resumes out. On a personal level, I want to refine my resume, make sure it meets what the current and near future demand is. What is it that I'm targeting for my next position? What are my vulnerabilities in my resume? And I start working on that now. So, but I want to have other people's resumes too. I want to bring talent on board that fills some of those vacuums that I have when it comes to how I adjust my business and change my business. So there's a lot of different specters to look at when it comes to that. Now, once I've done it and I've got all my answers to all of this, I take all of this, I take into consideration what is the other impacting factors, such as what are the government policies in place right now that are mitigating my ability to perform in a normal capacity. I take all these different factors and I plug them in and I adapt. So when I take a look at adapting as an organization, the first thing I do is, I once again take a deep breath and I realize change is normal. We should always be adapting. If we don't adapt, we don't innovate, we fail, we get left behind. So we take a look at that, we take a deep breath, and we look at what changes I need to make anyhow. The next thing is I start building my response to the crisis. I build my strategy, and I use my information that I got from that, and I take a look at the most probable course, and there's another military term for you here, most probable courses of action and the most dangerous course of action. I find that middle ground, and I take my most probable course of action, and I say, okay, this is what I'm going to build my strategy on. And I use that business plan questionnaire, and I plug that in. I plug all the other impacting factors in there, and that's what shapes my strategy. And when I develop that strategy, I try to develop it in phases. I mean, you may find out that, well, I see this horrible effect that's going to happen on us, but then when you implement your strategy and you get rid of all of these people and you realize, you know what? I'm still drawing revenue. Once I started changing some of these ways, I didn't need to do all of that. So look at a phased approach at your strategies and look at triggers to tell you when that next phase needs to be implemented. Now, as a strong leader, you know that taking care of people is one aspect. You want to focus on survivability, but people are first. Now, the interesting aspect to that is I kind of look at it like from this perspective. And I know sometimes as a leader, you have to make the hard choice and people have to be let go. You have to reorganize. And that is the way life is. And that's what you get paid for as a leader, to make hard decisions. But you also have to see the big picture. These are the people that have made you successful. These are the people that have taken care of you the whole time. You should have already had a plan to be able to take care of them to a certain extent during a crisis. And when a crisis does hit and you have to adjust, what a great opportunity to start doing all that training and all those things that we weren't able to do before and we always complained about. I never get to train my people. I never get time to let them, learn new products, new systems, and get them certified on. Well, this is your time. Maximize this opportunity in this time to do so. Look at other revenues and pull information from them. Allow them to help save you and your company. Look at new ways to bring in revenues, so on and so forth. There's some great ideas that have popped up out there too when it comes to new revenue stream. Like, for example, gyms. They're renting out their equipment, and now they're conducting online classes. And they're outstanding classes. And this may be something that be an aspect of their permanent business model. So take a look at creative ways, but solicit from your people. Because we surround ourselves with people that should be smarter than us. We surround our people with people that are subject experts in certain areas. Capitalize on them. Use them to your advantage. For individuals, it's the same thing. There are things that we need to do to adapt as well. You need to make yourself more marketable. Make yourself a greater asset to your company. Educate yourself and improve yourself. This is something that never changes. The day you quit learning is a wasted day. It's a bad day for you. You should be learning something new every day. Now, the world is changing. Yes, we're all in a crisis, and right now everybody's fixated on that, but take a deep breath as an individual and look at the big picture there too. There are things that we always said are going to happen. We're going to go online. The market's going to turn online greater. This and that. Are you knowledgeable on how to use a lot of these online platforms, sharing platforms, cloud, all these different? If not, start educating yourself on all of these things. Learn how to manage and learn how to lead in a remote way, because businesses today are becoming more and more globalized and more remote anyhow. So learn those skill sets on your own. Take the advantage to be more proactive instead of reactive. Don't wait for it to happen. Look at what's going to happen and be more proactive for it now. Be proactive for your company. Look at ways to help them and ways to adapt for them, and share those ideas and push those ideas up. In the military, I used to say everybody had a voice. My life has been saved by 17-year-olds in combat. I have had 17-year-olds have the best idea on how to achieve something when I was in the military. And I look at my companies and I think the same exact thing. I want to hear everybody's ideas, because you never know where the next great idea will come from. Be that person. Take the initiative and think of it from that perspective. How can I help my company? Yeah, my job is this. Maybe my bubble is this. How can I help my bubble? Then the other thing I want to talk about or mention on that slide is self-control, emotions. You know, the reality is there's a lot of things that are happening around us all the time. There are things to stress about. There's things to relieve stress. But remember, emotions are a choice. Granted, inevitably they overwhelm us, but it is up to us to smile, make somebody else smile, make a difference in somebody else's life, and stop stressing over those things that we do not affect and we cannot change. There are things in our world that we can change. So if you're stressing over something that you can change and you can affect, then take the time and address it. Look at it. How do I fix this? How do I reduce this stress factor? How do I reduce this from impacting me? How do I reduce this from impacting others? For example, a lot of people are stressing on how to deal with a crisis. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I am sharing a bit of my knowledge, a bit of my insight to help inform you. And informed people are less stressed people. People that are confident about what somebody knows what they're doing, people that are confident of that, people are communicating with them, that develops confidence. People develop confidence through knowing that there are proper steps that are being taken out there, and most importantly, by being provided hope. The reality is this crisis, like every crisis, it will end. There will be a new crisis in the future, but this crisis that we're going through right now will end. And we will all be fine. We will adapt. We will overcome. And at a personal level, no matter how bad it's impacting us, we will overcome. And we will get through this. We'll get through it together. And you get through things together by being parts of groups, family groups, business groups, organizations like the AmCham. Lean on them. They're there for you, and you are there for them. So together, we can achieve anything. And that is one of the things when you stop and think about leveraging corporate social responsibility. We have an obligation as a company also to support our community, to help them in crisis. Like, for example, KGL leveraging their trucks and all their assets that they have like that to support the government moving their assets and helping people here in this society. That's awesome. That's amazing. There's a lot of other companies that are out there doing the same thing. Factories that are now producing, for example, PPE, personal protective equipment for our medical personnel and first responders that are out there so that they have the proper equipment that they need. It's amazing. It's watching the business community come together and support in a crisis. And that's exactly what we should be doing. But there's a lot of other ways that we can support too. You know, when you fire 500 people, sometimes you have to. Please understand, I am not saying that sometimes you just have to make harsh decisions, hard changes. But keep this in mind. 500 people going into the society with no jobs, that is now a burden on the society. Who's that burden on now? The government. In the state of Kuwait, they take care of everybody. They are people oriented. And what do? They're feeding all of these people that can't feed themselves and no longer have jobs. You want to make a difference on society? Those are your people. Take ownership. You take care of them. You feed them. Keep a job for them. Find ways to at least mitigate the impact that is occurring on them, which in turn mitigates the impact the crisis is having on us as a country. Because all the money that they're spending is going to have to go back again from somewhere else. So we all can make a difference. In our organizations, we can make a difference in creative ways. It's not just about money, but there's knowledge sharing that can have in best practices. The government is looking for ways to address all of these things, and the business community should be leveraged to support that. But it goes same way from person to person too. It's the same thing when it comes to us looking at our people within our company. We should be looking at different models and different ways to mitigate all of these things and support one another as we all go through any crisis that we have in life. With that being said, I want to thank you all very, very much for taking the time to listen. And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to open the floor up to any questions out there, or any ideas that you have that will help people in crisis or businesses in crisis. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Paula? Okay, Mary.
I just want to thank you, Frank. I just sent you a nice hand clap. And, you know, this is just such great information. And I really appreciate your positive approach, which, you know, I happen to share that, but I think it's, I wish I had something else to add, but it was pretty comprehensive, Frank. So great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Frank, one person says that they're mitigating issues by giving opportunity to tech talents affected by this pandemic in Kuwait.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of it. By how?
Oh, my bad. They're advertising for tech talent. They're giving an opportunity for people who are in technology to contact them.
Well, that's great. I mean, you know, and that's one of the things too, because there's a lot of businesses out there, ironically, that are hiring right now. There's a lot of opportunity that's out there because a lot of businesses are suffering, but there's a lot of businesses that are blowing up and they need support. And if you don't have those skill sets, look at gaining those skill sets and look at becoming marketable in that aspect as well. So take a look at what jobs are out there right now, because that's what jobs will be out there in the future, most likely too.
And Riyadh has his hand up.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I would like, my name is Riyadh Al-Kazmi. I would like to thank you so much for this nice thought. But what is your expectation for the small retailers, how they gonna absorb to recover this crisis? You just mentioned about the KGL, they laid down about 500 workers, but now in Kuwait, as you said, our biggest trade is the small retail shops. Do you think they will be disappear? Do you think the market has to be changed to online? And as you know, in the United States, online is the cheapest price offer. Here in Kuwait, the highest price offer, it's online. So how can you manage it?
That's a very good question. There's a couple of different factors when it comes to that. Number one is like you said, online. But there are more economical ways potentially to do online. Looking at joint services or merging multiple small retailers merging together to offer all of their products online through a single source or a single site that they all mutually pay into to mitigate the cost effect that has on them. So there are other creative ways that are out there, but yes, the retail industry, obviously it will take a hit, especially when you talk about niche tech, niche retail and the small business that's out there. The reality though is in the long run, it will be needed again. And it will be back again. The question is how can you manage your way through the crisis, mitigate the impact economically on you, try to continue to maintain contact with your public, with your customers, and develop new forms of revenue to get those customers back to you. So right now, there's a lot of people still buying here in Kuwait. A lot of people. You know, there's a lot of Gurgian clothes being bought, even though Gurgian's not happening in Kuwait. But those retailers, how do you get to your customers? There's a lot of different ways to do that. And one of them is taking a look at, why don't you contact some of the other retailers that are out there that are suffering like you, mutually work together, develop a single app, or work with somebody that has an app, and then try to fall under an umbrella underneath that and be able to capitalize on those types of things.
Well, thank you so much for this advice, but still, I mean, we are as a Kuwaiti, and I believe 80% of the retail stores are owned by non-Kuwaiti. So how can we manage this matter? And we don't know what will happen in the future. So I wish, I hope in next time, because unfortunately I have missed half of your speech, but I think we should get together after the crisis, or while we are here from time to time, we can discuss and chat to see how can we manage, especially in such a small market of Kuwait, where the criteria here in Kuwait, everybody wants cheap, cheap, cheap. And this is the result of low cost or low offer prices to the customers. Anyhow, thank you so much. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, my pleasure. But I'd like to add one other caveat to that. You know, I'll put my chairman of the American Business Council here hat on. One of the things that we do is we are advocates for the different industries that are out there. We're advocates for American business and those Kuwaiti companies that work with American business companies. And one aspect of that is identifying all of these challenges that do exist and presenting those to the right people so that we can affect change. And exactly what you said is something that we intend on doing, and we are doing, and we continue to do, and will be doing into the future. And that is looking at all the different industries that are out there, identifying what are the challenges in those industries, and how do we address those things to make it more marketable for all of those that are members with us. Thank you again. I appreciate that. Paula?
Another person is asking if you have advice on work-life balance changes in the new world.
You know, that's a great question. When it comes to work-life balance, it's a new environment. It's difficult for a lot of people to adjust to this different type of environment, including me. You know, I'm not used to being in my house all the time, and now sitting behind, you know, in one of my rooms as my office. I'm used to engaging with people. I'm used to a different lifestyle. So work-life balance, one of the things that I always look at is, look, you have to learn to separate the two, even though they're under the same roof now. You have to look at establishing some kind of rhythm in your life. You know, I now have a period of time where I tend to work. I have a period of time where I focus on me, whether it's increasing my education, my knowledge, and, you know, seeing what's out there, learning more about the everyday affairs of the world and all that. And then I have a period of time that's for me when it comes to health and fitness, time with my family, and all of these types of things. So you need to adjust your work life and be able to delineate the two of them. Now, some of us, you know, obviously work is 24 hours for some of you that are out there, but you need to prioritize and understand that you're going to burn out if you just end up sitting in front of this computer all the time, and it's always about work, 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 work. You need to adjust to this new life. So work-life balance is extraordinarily important. And there have been a lot of people already talking about work-life balance. We had an amazing Women in Business webinar just a little while ago, and I would refer anybody that has questions on that, I would refer them to that webinar, which is on the website, and listen to them and what they have to say about this new norm, working in this environment, and the psychological effects that is having on people. Great question. Thank you.
Another person, Dr. Musaid, is asking, Frank, thanks a lot for the presentation. Please remember that the corona issue has a chance basically to create PTSD. Do you have any feedback on that?
That's probably more in the webinar that was done in the Women in Business group talking about remote working. They did address that fact. And again, I would encourage you to take a look at that. But, you know, as a ex-military guy with combat experience and everything else, I get asked a lot about PTSD. And I actually, yes. You know, here's the thing. Anytime that there's a crisis in your life, it has the potential to impact you in a negative kind of way. And when it impacts you in a negative way, that's an aspect of PTSD. So it is something to be aware of. It is something to pay attention to, and it is something to address. And as a leader, it is something to be looking at in your people as well. So yeah, it does absolutely have the potential for impacting you in that regard in a lot of different ways. And it's not necessarily working remotely. It can be the impact overall of how significant it has affected people and their life change, that it's so overwhelming for them that they have a difficulty to adapt. And if you do, and if you feel that you're at that point, then get help. Talk to a professional and get help to make a better you. Because a better, happier, healthier you is a productive you, and that's what you want to be. Thank you.
Okay, and now Mohammed Bataine, he has his hand up.
Yes.
From Jordan. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce in Jordan. Currently, we have the honor of chairing the ABCK-AmChams. So it's a pleasure to be with you today, and I want to thank you very much, Frank. Although I'm sort of like unlucky, I was on another webinar that I'm hosting that went over time. So I joined you like in the middle of your presentation, but it was really, I thought, very, very useful. As you know, in Jordan or anywhere else, we're all learning on the job. I mean, this is not, there's no manual on what to do in crisis like these. So we took a lead at AmCham Jordan to basically guide a lot of the industries, mainly our members. And there's no one size fits all. So we were like handling them in different sectors. And we handled issues like the PPE, where we're now exporting to the US, for example. Some of our factories transformed and learned quickly, and the innovation and speed and is the essence of the game. And it was a balancing act between, of course, the health battle, if you want to call it, and that of the economy, or the health challenge and the economic challenge. We've developed a lot of do's and don'ts, what works for us and so forth. And I'd like to really extend some of the experiences that we had recently and share with you some of the briefs, recommendations that we have actually put forth, and what worked and what doesn't work, especially in helping those sectors that really look like they're going to be suffering going forward, like tourism, like anything to do with the restaurant business, or even clothing. And others that are in luck and they just need some support and really guidance as well. And a lot of them have to start to learn to change and shift. So I'm just basically, what you were saying in your presentation, now is the time to be quick, change and live with it and go forward. I don't really have a particular question, but I'm just interested to know if in Kuwait, also because you have another issue, and that is the price of oil has gone down. So again, this even puts even further strain on the economy and further strain on the businesses, especially the small, medium-sized enterprises that live on a day-to-day basis, on how to change and adapt quickly, and move on. And some big countries have put up to 20% of their GDP as a stimulus, to get the economy going. I don't know what's happening in Kuwait, for example, but do you think that these stimulus do they work, or do you think it's better to just simply work with what you've got and go forward? And do you see countries really coming out of this without relying heavily on government support? Thanks, Frank.
No problem. Thank you. For those that don't know, we are a member of AmCham MENA, and MENA is a network of AmChams throughout the Middle East. All of us have been working together and cross-talking, not just through webinar events through AmCham, but also with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We've done global webinars. We have been sharing and collecting best practices from all over the world so that we can bring those to you as well. And that's exactly what Mohammed was talking about, and he's been in the forefront of all of this. And as the chair of MENA, AmCham MENA, he's made a tremendous difference in that regard. So I thank him, and I thank you for being on today. And don't worry about not being here in the beginning. If you would like to see the beginning of this, I was stated earlier, this webinar is recorded and it will be posted on our ABCK website. So you can feel free to go there and see anything that you may have missed. Now, as far as stimulus packages go, Kuwait has already done numerous stimulus packages for SMEs and for individuals in the state of Kuwait. They're changing and adjusting policies to support businesses that are occurring here, and there are several other that are effects that are all occurring too. There's so many, I can't go through them all, but there are a lot of things that Kuwait has been doing for the business community, and there's a lot more that they plan to do for the business community. And they're also looking beyond, and it's very important, and I want to reemphasize this. You need to look beyond the crisis as well, and you need to look at the recovery phase of operations and plan for that. But before I expand on the recovery portion of it, I want to answer the rest of Mohammed's question. As far as the use of stimulus and so on and so forth, you know, I look at it from the context of I have an obligation to my country, whether I'm in the United States or whether I'm in Kuwait. And if I need it, I need it, and we'll work together and so on and so forth. But if I don't need it and I can make do without it, I will, because then it will go to somebody else that does need it, and it will be there. It'll be enough to go around, and it will mitigate the impact that I'm having on my country, the state of Kuwait, so on and so forth. And they need support in that regard as well. Now, and there's a lot of resources that are out there. ABCK, the government. Make sure you visit the government websites. Kadipa is doing an amazing job. His Excellency, Dr. Sheikh Mashal, is out there talking about all these changes on a regular basis. And we just had a webinar with him in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce on that. So, you know, hats off to all of the people here. Now, when it comes to recovery, you need to develop a recovery strategy, not just for your business, but for yourself as well. And I meant to expound a little bit further on that as well. And when you're looking at these stimulus and you're looking at recovery, you need to look further down the road and understand it needs to be a phased approach as well. What are your triggers that indicate that you are in a recovery phase? What are the processes that you're going to do? And then how does the external factors affect you? Take a look at what's happening around the rest of the world, and it will give you an idea of how you are going to be recovering as well. For example, in the state of Kuwait, we're looking at a high point in our curve not being until a couple of weeks at least from now. So we're still in the backside of the curve, and we're still looking at reaching the high point, whereas a lot of countries have already passed and went over that curve, and now they're already transitioning to opening. Look at how they're opening. You know, if you have a restaurant, you have a store, in some countries, you know, you can only have 30% occupancy. Okay, well, take a look at that phased approach to opening the country back up, and then how does that phased approach affect you, and then how are you going to develop a phased approach towards recovery? And right now is the time to be looking and strategizing and developing that plan, not when it's time to execute. So thank you very much, Mohammed, for the questions. Hopefully I answered that. And I also thank you for triggering my thought on the recovery aspect as well.
Okay, Frank. And one last question. This is from Lloyd Parker. He said he's concerned about the potential for civil unrest, the effect on marginalized expat workers, and the ultimate impact to society and business in Kuwait. He's asking, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
That is a very good concern. You know, everybody looks at it as it's the government's responsibility to maintain peace and order and support the society and everything else. I don't agree with that. I believe it is all of our responsibility. We all must pull together in a crisis and support one another and help one another. And if you are not talking to your employees, you're not calming them down, you're not keeping them informed, then, and they're the ones that are out there, then you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. We all have an obligation to support and help as much as we can. We're not the decision makers in some of these policies, but we are the ones that can explain what those are. You know, when they said one of the things that went out was about 24-hour closure, and everybody said, what are we going to do? 24 hours, 20 days. And then immediately followed, the government announced, hey, these things will still be open. You're still going to be able to get appointments. There's still techniques. We've already developed apps so you can get a curfew, be able to move in curfew to hospitals and medical care. There's a lot of different things that have occurred out there. When people are informed of all of this, that helps mitigate that. When people are worried that they're not going to be able to eat, and you're taking care of your employees and making sure they at least are able to eat, you're mitigating that. So take a look at what all you can be doing as a person, as a company, as an organization, to help support this nation to get through this crisis and alleviate some of these concerns that he mentioned there. because they are valid concerns. And everybody's looking and working towards making that happen. But I believe it all starts with communication and information and empathy, understanding what everybody is going through and supporting them and being able to get through this all.
All right,
Thank you.
Frank. Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to do this insightful discussion. Again, we want to thank everyone who participated. And if you would like to see our upcoming events, initiatives, and types of memberships, please go to our website at abckw.org. And if you'd like to become a member of our Chamber of Commerce, email us at membership@abckw.org. We wish you all a wonderful evening.
Good job, Frank.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Frank. Have a good
Thanks
evening.
again, Frank, and goodbye.
My pleasure.